Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Today's episode of the Fundraising Elevator is a continued conversation with the incredible Rachel D'Souza of Gladiator Consulting in St. Louis. Rachel is an expert thought leader on community-centric fundraising. She was on last week to introduce us to the concept of community-centric fundraising and is back this week to help us apply this work to our fundraising events. Rachel, welcome back. We're glad you're here.
I'm so glad to see y'all.
I want to make sure to encourage folks that if you have not yet listened to last week's episode, which is episode 57, stop, pause, go back. Listen to it. It's brilliant, and it tees up today's discussion. Rachel has so much wisdom to ground us in this work. And as a thought leader and all-around badass, when it comes to shifting the sector, we're glad to chat today, specifically about how this shows up in events. So let's start with the big picture. We work a lot in advocacy, and most of our clients have been challenged for years with the idea of setting aside a night and sort of foregoing some of our inclusion best practices for the sake of a big fundraising event. We don't always think those are mutually exclusive, which is its own conversation, right? And we have found a lot of ways to start to bust down the doors and love challenging the norms within organizations. And we would love to have you also share, what does it mean to you to decolonize your event?
Yeah, how much time do we have?
All the time in the world.
Right. So, I think first things first, there's a lot of sort of trickle down in this sector, or, this organization did one thing that helped them raise a lot of money. Now we have to figure out how to do it, right? And so I think about this often with the gala that, in its infancy was really sort of attached to universities or hospitals or these very large institutions that had very wealthy people, right, connected to them. And that event, and perhaps what those donors expected of it made sense. Then it trickles down, and you have a variety of other organizations sort of trying to figure out how to fit their community into this sort of elevated event. And it hasn't done as much right as we needed it to. And then we sort of get into, pandemic life and the generational shifts of things. And we find that people are sort of continuing to try to get everybody in the same room to do one thing and maybe make everybody happy, but also raise all the money that we need to raise. And it's not working.
Yeah.
It's not working. And so I think the first place that I go to, in this concept of decolonizing your fundraising event is really asking the question, like, why are we doing this and who is it for?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then actually taking that answer and thinking about it. We have a organization that we work with that does LGBTQIA advocacy across the state of Missouri, which
Thank God they're there.
How do we
that
fund them? Let's fund them.
Work,
Let's fund them.
That's right. For a long time, historically, this organization, had a board and a primary set of donors that were mostly white men. And they had a set of events that really catered to them. And in the last 20 or so years, as sort of our cultural window has shifted in this country, and we're moving, right, this population of folks more towards equality and equity. There are more identities in this space. And they realized, this very sort of elevated, elite, high ticket space that we've been trying to fundraise in doesn't include the people that we're fighting for, right? And so we need to create, it can still be a gathering, but a gathering where everybody feels belonging and everybody can contribute in a way that is meaningful to them, that advances the organization. And so over the course of probably 3 or 4 years, so this wasn't like we reimagined our event, through something with our donors, right? This was a multi-year process of saying, first, we're going to play around with venue. Okay, now we're going to play around with ticket price. Now we feel comfortable to play around with entertainment. Now we can think about having sort of a theme or a way of dressing that is a little bit more broad than, what we see. And they now have this sort of robust room of folks who show up in the way that they want to show up, who give in the way that they want to give, and to enjoy building relationships with each other. And I think that is ultimately the goal of our events, to build community and to get resources for our organization. And we somehow have lost it, right? We've lost it a little bit. So if we know that the world is changing, if we know that people are talking more about their identities, right, on a spectrum or whatever it is, then we as nonprofits have an opportunity to create belonging for those folks at our events. We can't keep saying, oh, well, we'll just have a different ticket price, and then other people will show up. You can make your ticket price free. And if I walk into a room and feel like I don't belong, you're not getting another gift from me.
Yes.
It's interesting. COVID taught us a lot about access, and it has changed how people gather, for sure. And to us, it was sort of this opportunity that started to shift. And we've seen a couple of the things you're talking about really start to evolve with a lot of our organizations. We're having conversations, not just our goal is 400 people in the room and raise $4,000 or $400,000. We've really started to see the conversation shift to, who are we doing this for? What is our purpose? Those are harder questions to answer sometimes for organizations, and we peel back that question and sort of keep asking it in multiple layers so that we can start to get to the root of what is the impact we can really have when we gather people together. But one of the big revenue resources associated with fundraising events oftentimes are our corporate sponsorships. And our corporate partners have... Some have very willingly entered the conversation about how do we do things differently. Some have policy, protocol, and capitalism fueling their decision making, as well as like tax breaks and things like that. But we've had folks come to us and say, help us decolonize our structure for sponsorship proposals. How do we start to talk to sponsors differently? And we've seen some things starting to shift around folks willing to address what is possible within their budget and what are their needs as a partner at the table. Have you had corporate conversations that are shifting or seen anything in the sponsorship sector really making a shift?
Yeah, and I think it, absolutely aligns with what you just shared. I think sort of the number one shift that I have seen is sort of away from that traditional tiered sponsorship package. And more of a if you give within this range, here's a set of benefits. Pick one from here, pick one from here, pick one from here, right? And so people you're not offering sort of the same blanket benefits to sponsorship to an organization at a specific level. You're letting them actually sort of choose what makes sense for them, for their community, for their business. And I think that there are some pros and cons with that, because the very first thing that you see change when you do with that is most people will opt out of having to send employees to that event.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So if we are trying to cast a wider net and we are trying to sort of figure out how to be more engaging, we want butts in the seats. We do, right? And so what does it sort of look like to work with that, organization to make sure that the people that are coming aren't just doing it to check a box, right? But they are doing it with a purpose of being in further and deeper relationships. So the sponsorship doesn't end, right, when the check is dropped off and the tax letter is received, right? It continues on, right, when you then go and meet with those employees at the office, right, to have the lunch and learn or to bring those folks in for the tour, right? So it's sort of an expansion, I think, of benefits, I would say, because they're not just discreetly connected to the events.
Yeah. We had a food bank come to us and say, let's decolonize this process so that when we're talking to our corporate partners, we have a plan. And one of the things we did was identify that every sponsor is in the room. Every sponsor has the opportunity to attend. But then, similar to what you're saying, this sort of choose one from this column, one from that column, we identified that every level of giving came with a set of choose your own 5 benefits, 4 benefits, 3 benefits. So there's still a tier to it, but then it allowed them to start to identify the benefits that were most impactful for them. And one of the things that we did was offer the opportunity for them to name a need for us to consider and have a conversation. And most folks went that direction in the conversation of, well, we have this initiative. How could we merge these two together? Or we're trying to get our employees more engaged in community. Could we set a regular volunteering time?
Yeah.
That opportunity to enter into conversation actually created a stronger partnership.
Yeah. Yep. And I've also, to that point, seen sponsorship sort of shift away from sort of being focused on like, how can we honor you the most, to like, how can we demonstrate the impact of this sponsorship on the organization?
Yeah.
So again, sort of a little bit departing from that traditional tier model, it may be that your sponsorship for the evening, a part of that is going to allow for childcare, right? Or
Yeah.
a part of that is going to provide access for youth tickets, right? For youth to be able to attend and be included, or for other clients to sort of join the event. And so it isn't ultimately just about the visibility of that corporate partner as it is them understanding like, this is actually how my gift is showing up in this space as well.
Yeah. I adore that you have brought up multiple times the word belonging as a goal for an event. And I think many events get reverse engineered, hoping maybe that happens, right? But they do start with this arbitrary thing where, let's say it's a well-meaning board member, or let's say it's somebody, a major donor who has a large voice within an organization saying, well, that organization did X with 400 people and $400,000. We have to do that too.
Right.
Doesn't matter if we've ever been on a path for that. That makes sense for us. There's a resource allocation for that, whatever. But I think these conversations get grossly oversimplified when we hone in on ticket price. So I want to let's crack that box wide open and talk about, because I think often we go back and forth about what's a proper ticket price. You know, we're often in very oversimplified conversations about that when we're like, it should at least not cost you to have a butt-in seat. But that doesn't get at this idea of belonging at an event, which is the ultimate goal for an event for organizations, because they're not cheap. They're not easy to do. The internal resource required to make these happen, on top of all the other hats our friends are wearing, is insane sometimes. So I say ticket price, it's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
How do organizations decide? That's a gatekeeper. Ticket price is a gatekeeper of who's in, who's out.
Is.
So,
and you know, I'll also say this, it actually doesn't matter how low we go. If someone isn't going to feel good in the room, they're not going to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
And so to your point, I think ticket price is part of it. Now, from a financial perspective, right? We don't want to lose money. And it is sort of, for me and with our clients, it's sort of always been my goal that, you know, our sponsorships cover the true cost of the event, and ticket prices sort of wind up being icing on the cake in terms of revenue. I think for some folks, there is this idea that sort of the higher the ticket price, the more elevated the event might be, or, you know, the more exclusive the event might be. And at the end of the day, I think it's really important, to your point, to sort of think about the audience, right? And so it is okay. It is okay to decide we are going to have an event where the ticket price is going to be $500, right? And we are looking to raise this amount of money from this group of people, right? That is okay.
Yes.
Where we get in trouble, I think, is saying we're going to have this event. There is going to be a $500 ticket. $100 tickets so other people can come too. They still have to figure out how to fit into this curated experience. But we're inclusive. We're going to be inclusive. Friends, that's not being inclusive, right? That's inviting them to a space that's going to harm them, right? It doesn't matter, right? And so I think of a couple different things. I think that it is important to create an opportunity for your event participants to learn. So if you have one ticket price, tell them why. If you have 5 ticket prices that are based on, maybe it's a student ticket or a nonprofit employee ticket or whatever that is, tell them why you're doing it. Explain what it means and explain what you're hoping for so that you can get that better buy-in. But the ticket price is sort of, I think the place that we get hung up on from a sense of profit and things like that. And really the conversation is who are we wanting in that room? What are we trying to create? Because there are going to be people who we may want in the room who ultimately aren't going to make a financial contribution to our organization. That is not the value of our relationship with them. And they have to feel welcome, right? They have to feel belonging because we also need those people in our community too. So I'll stop there because I feel like I could rant about this.
I think it's critical for folks to think about what that room looks like and why.
Yeah.
And I think
experiences.
All too often it's about, well, we need X number of people to buy a ticket at X price. And it's, to your point, Rachel, it's not that that's wrong if that's the event you're throwing, but don't set other people up to be in that room and not, I've been in a room where what I was offered wasn't what was fulfilled on in that room.
Right.
And from a very pragmatic standpoint, that impacts your fundraising from me, but also it impacts your relationship with me moving forward. And so I think we get hung up on the idea of ticket price. And sometimes, I don't want to say it's code, but sometimes we need to be having a different conversation. It is code, right?
Yeah.
It's a gateway control, but also it's about, if you're uncomfortable as an organization about the kind of event you're throwing, the kind of work you do and who's in that room, there's a lot of other work besides figuring out a ticket price that needs to happen, right?
Yeah. We've had 2 organizations that I think have addressed this in a really compelling way. They're both very culturally specific, socially justice-minded organizations. And one organization centers the purpose of their event is to create community that is celebrating the diversity of all that our community has to offer. And they educate their guests with a very simple information about how much it costs per person for the event to be produced. And in this particular case, I think the event is about a $375 cost to the organization per person. But they have a ticket range from $75 to $600, and they say, please choose what feels most comfortable to you. But with that education, they have folks that choose all over the map, and it averages out for them to actually be successful and profitable. The other organization we work with that's, I think, really done this well is they have thought very specifically that their mission is to bring together the community they serve with those who are financially supporting and impacting that community. So everyone that they serve is built into the budget as a guest of the organization with no cost. They don't receive the same invitation. They receive an invite that simply says, please be our guest. And they plan on about 100 seats at that event are the clients that they serve with an invitation that says, be our guest. The other 300 people at the event are paying an increased ticket price to cover the cost of all seats, and very intentionally are being invited to purchase their ticket and come as a supporter of the organization. And every element of their event is designed to be inclusive of bringing those 2 communities into conversation together. Yeah. So I feel like they've really approached it not from a transaction of ticket price, but what are we trying to accomplish with this event?
Yep.
Well, let's take a short break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about where we're seeing community-centric fundraising show up in event practices. And we'll be right back after we hear from a few of our supporters. We've been partnering with Greater Giving for over 20 years as our go-to event auction software. Greater Giving allows us to do our job, planning fundraising events, even better because we can manage guest lists, seating, bid number assignments, and sales all in one place.
That makes it great for our nonprofit partners and their guests. Check out Greater Giving for your next event at greatergiving.com. Link in the show notes.
All right. Well, during the break, we have some storms going on. And so we did some relocating. So Rachel's in a new location so we can try to get a better internet connection. But we wanted to talk about the fundraising at the event.
Yep.
So if we are centralizing a shift, moving thoughtfully toward who is the community we're gathering, how are we thinking more community focused in our big gatherings? How does that change the fundraising at the event?
Yeah, so I feel like I've seen, the first thing I think of when you say that is we can start bidding on auction items a week before the event, right? The
Mhm.
technology has set us up to sort of already start that process. I have love-hate feelings for technology in events because I'll tell you, like, if I'm gonna go, I wanna talk to the people at my table. I wanna be chatting, and I don't want you to be like this trying to make sure that
Yeah.
you're gonna, get your item. And so I do really love it when organizations have like very finite times where the technology is open and available for participants to engage that way. And I also really love seeing it when the technology allows us to watch the community in the room help the organization hit the goal. Like,
Yes.
that is beautiful. I mean, you want to talk about community doing the work together and
Yeah.
telling that story. That makes my heart sing every time.
Awesome.
And I think it also creates an opportunity for people who like don't know where they fit to sort of
Yeah.
take that leap to be like, okay, like everyone at my table is participating. I haven't contributed yet, right? They're
Right.
still 80% to their goal. So I think that is another way for us to really, for our events to benefit, right, from technology. I have, we could go, I won't even go into give days. Never mind. We'll just stay here.
Well, I think at the event, the thing that you just highlighted too is the move toward the collective action toward impact
Yeah.
on mission
Yeah.
versus moving away from some of the transaction. And the transaction often gets us like in our phone or in the bidding process and away from the community. And that is something that we're finding post COVID that has changed so much is that drive to be in relationship with
Yeah.
each other. So the giving that's happening with the name on the screen, the thermometer
Yep.
rising, I think helps create the community where the bidding on your cell phone and looking at that like wine basket that you want to take home detracts. Yeah.
It
So I think that there's a shift that has happened more towards mission giving and impact.
absolutely.
Let's talk stories and program at your event. This is another topic I feel like we could spend years
Years
on.
on.
And I think can be the space that either really opens up and brings folks in or creates distance like no other.
Yes.
Rachel, what are some should and should not do's from your vantage point about what happens in programming during an event from the stage?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I do think that this topic has been pretty robust in the sector over the last few years. So I'm sort of happy to see us moving away from these, very tokenized
Mhm.
Yeah.
stories with a sense of, dramatic urgency, right? To being a little bit more celebratory, centering joy in the stories that we're telling about our community. One thing that I would really love to see organizations do more of is sort of connect the dots over time between the stories they're telling.
Mm.
So, again, we sort of tend to be sort of very episodic, very urgent, very sort of time limited in the stories that we're telling. And our organizations are continuing to do this work. So I don't really want to hear what you did in the last year. I want to hear how the things you did 5 years ago have impacted this moment and
Mm.
what everyone in the room today is going to seed for the future. So how do we get a little bit better at sort of telling the longer form,
Yeah. Yeah.
story of our work and not just encourage that urgent give now, but make this gift today. Join us again here. And next year when we gather, here's the
Mm.
story we hope to tell, right?
Yeah.
Like bring folks along in it. Don't close the door on them, right? When they make that initial gift. And then I will, I have my own story. Of being a heart attack survivor and having my own experience used in the context of a fundraising event. and having it really warped to the benefit of the organization and to the donors that they wanted to raise money from. And so having been a person that sits in that seat, I will tell you that there is a process that needs to be rooted in integrity, that you engage with the stories that you're telling, because we're people too.
Yeah.
We are enthusiastic supporters of your organization. We might not be writing a check, but sharing our personal experience with you is one of the most valuable things we have to offer, and it needs to be treated like a major gift.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
We saw you speak. You hosted a beautiful panel discussion on ethical storytelling at the Raise conference back in September. And then we had Daria Ford on our podcast after that. And one of the things, she was on that panel with you. And one of the things that she said that I just thought was so important is, as the storyteller in the nonprofit, put yourself in the shoes of the person bravely telling their story. If you want to make sure that you're taking an ethical approach, you have to continually think about yourself in that role.
Right.
And we have learned so much over the years about the importance of, and also the true gratitude and celebration and joy that comes in having an opportunity to share your story when it's done well. Right. And so I think it's important that we really think about those, how we move that needle, how we make that impact. There's an element of that, though, in the storytelling that I want to bring back to the technology conversation, because I know technology can be for good or bad. And one of the things that we've seen in this space is that when we have beautiful content that we've created for our event, technology gives us the opportunity to share that out to a wider audience besides that event. And we share often the sort of thought that we need to be in getting the sign off and consent of the storyteller, not just in that moment, but also for all purposes that it's being used for. That if you're sharing that story at the event and they're brave and they're at that event and they're sharing that story, they've agreed to that, but have they also shared for you to put it on YouTube in perpetuity or social media? Technology has sort of moved and advanced what's possible with our storytelling, but I think it has required us to be even more thoughtful and specific and detail oriented about conversations, consent, and consent once doesn't mean consent always. And I feel like it's important that we remember that when we put something in an online format for everyone to be able to observe, if that person's story changes and they don't want that to be public anymore, that we respect that and remove that. Where do you see?
Technology makes it difficult.
It does.
The internet's forever, y'all.
It is.
It is. And I will tell you, even with everything that you just named, one thing that I have learned in the last decade is that even if I consented for myself, that didn't mean that I consented for my children or that my children consented. And there's definitely content of both of my children from when they were younger in their lives that have shown up in different stories I've told for my work. And in my case, they're like, "Oh, okay, I was cute there. Oh, there are a lot of places in which children are not interested in having their face or their stories being included or told. And so even as an organization, if you have a consenting adult, it is important to be really careful about what it means to engage other people in their care.
I agree. That's so important. We're going to take a pause, and when we come back, we're going to ask you to jump in the fundraising elevator with us, and we'll be right back.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.
Welcome back. We're here with Rachel D'Souza. We've been talking about decolonizing your event. We are going to jump in the fundraising elevator now, where we are all headed up. Rachel, what is a tool or a bit of sage advice you have for all of our fundraising superheroes out there that they can put in their toolkit?
Yeah, I think right now, as I've sort of shared, we're in a moment of change. We're in a moment of growth, that can feel like loss in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. And it can be really scary. But what I would advise is that this is the time, to sort of get out of our safe space. We can't keep doing the same things over and over and hope that they're going to work and hope that they're going to fit. Even if that makes a donor happy or the development committee happy, right? Like it's not good for our organizations. And so
Right.
I think
Yeah.
really in this moment in the sector, have an opportunity to take a risk, to try something different. I know it sounds trite to say like embrace abundance, but like we have every opportunity to be the change that we want for our organizations in this moment. Nothing is permanent. And so if it means moving some money in your budget to try something new, if it means recruiting some new folks onto that development committee, if it means, bringing an ED along in a conversation, um, I think right now, our frontline development folks, our event folks, like find the coalition of people in your organization that are ready to lean into that change with you, and
Mm-hmm.
then take that step, right? Convene the meeting, have the conversation. But this isn't work we do by ourselves. It's not work
Right.
we do in a silo, and it's not going to work if we tackle it all by ourselves. So find your people and then move forward.
Well, on that note, if people want to find you and continue the conversation, what resources would you direct folks to be able to engage with Gladiator and engage with you in this conversation about both just community-centric fundraising, decolonizing your event, ethical storytelling? What resources do you have out there that we should connect folks to?
Yep. So if you want to connect with Gladiator, you visit our website, gladiatorrds.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. There is also a form on there. If you want more information about our work or to work with us, you can fill that out. If you want to track me down, you should find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. That is where I do my most of my engaging. And then you can catch me via community-centric fundraising. Check out the information on the hub, and you can connect with me there as well.
Rachel, we so appreciate your time.
Yes.
This was such a
So
lovely
appreciate your
conversation. We
time.
could have kept going.
We could have.
I know more future conversations.
But more than your time over these last two episodes, which if folks are tuning in today, make sure you catch episode 57 as well. Thank you for all you're doing for the sector and for holding folks up in the sector. It's really, it's inspirational to me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you so much. Rachel is sending us out on our winter break.
Yes.
So we are going to be taking a winter break to get ready for the new year. We are hoping to encourage all of our listeners to do the same. Cups don't fill on their own.
Yeah.
So taking some time and finding small things, big things, all the things to put some back in there is really, really critical to this work. Over the break, we're going to be pulling forward some of our favorite Fundraising Elevator episodes so far from season 2 for Encore Run. So those will be delivered each Wednesday. And then when we come back in January, we're going to be talking to Christine Campbell of our amazing podcast production partner, the AV department, all about how you can create a productive partnership with your AV vendor for an amazing event.
And if you haven't registered yet for Elevate, get ready to take your fundraising to school and join us at the annual Elevate conference. This 2-day training is hybrid and we'll teach you all about event design, equity, fundraising, sponsorship solicitation, and all the tools to take your event to the next level. You can register today at elevatenonprofit.com. We have a holiday promotion going on now, so we hope you register before the new year. Have a great winter break, everyone. Fill your cups and continue the brave conversations.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Friends, before we leave you, we want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, please share it with a friend and leave a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the Fundraising Elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristen for your program and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at elevatenonprofit.com. You can also find the link in the show notes.